Okay, so on your Unit 3 math worksheet, the first section has calculations for grid ratios. Grid ratio calculations are pretty straightforward. It's just that ratio of the height of the lead strips and the distance between them, which is the thickness of the interspace material. And I'm going to make sure I got my stuff straight. That'll do. Okay, so grid ratio, am I in? Yes, okay. Not backwards, good to see. Grid ratio is equal to the height of the lead strips divided by the distance between them. Does that all fit? Yes, I could move this business over. All right, that being said, looking at your math worksheet, the first section, calculating grid ratio, I'm just going to do one of these because it's pretty straightforward stuff. The things you need to remember mainly is that you should always have a whole number. Remember whenever we talked about the chapter and when I lectured on it, recorded that lecture, you guys watched it, your grid ratios are going to be like 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 6 to 1, 8 to 1, 10 to 1, 12 to 1. There is a 13 to 1. There's like 15 to 1, 16 to 1. They're whole numbers, right? If you do your math and you get like 0.175, you have gone wrong somewhere. Do not put 0.175 as an answer on an exam, okay? You're going to be wrong. Also, make sure that your units are the same, right? You want to make sure that you're working with millimeters divided by millimeters, centimeters divided by centimeters, so on and so forth, okay? So, on this worksheet, for the first problem, it gives you a height of the lead strips that is equal to 1.6 millimeters. And the distance between them, it gives us 0.1 millimeters. We plug this business into our equation and we get, I'm just going to abbreviate this because I'm lazy. Grid ratio is equal to 1.6 millimeters divided by 0.1 millimeters. Your millimeters will cancel out. And your grid ratio is going to be 16. Recall again that grid ratio is always, the R here stands for ratio, so we have to compare this number to another number. So if you get 16, then that means that your grid ratio is 16 to 1. Not too bad, hopefully. And hopefully this hasn't given anybody any serious motion sickness. Watching my hand and this thing zoom in and out and all that jazz, but I'm doing the best I can with what I got, right? All right, the second section on this worksheet has calculations for grid conversion factor. You can find the grid conversion factor using that same equation that I told you I will use for all of my calculations dealing with grids. Dealing with grids, I always use, how much room do I have? This is better. MAS 1 over MAS 2 equal to the grid correction factor 1 over the grid correction factor 2. So in this problem, it's asking us basically to find the grid correction factor for our equation. So if the first mass tells us that it was 40, actually, let me write this out. I like to write out, I like to write out what I'm doing so I can keep my thoughts straight. So our MAS 1 is going to be 40. MAS 2 is going to be 10. Our grid correction factor for the 1, we don't know because it just says with a grid. It doesn't tell us what kind, so we don't know. And our grid correction factor 2 is going to be, it says that 10 MAS was without a grid. So if it was without a grid, recall that the grid correction factor for that is a 1. That's coming from that little chart in your notes and the book. So now we can plug all this business in. MAS1 over 10 MAS is equal to, we don't freaking know, over 1. MAS's cancel out. 40 is equal to 10x, because we cross multiply, they're equal to each other, so we can crisscross applesauce. X is 4. The grid correction factor was 4 for that one. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. My paper got crooked, but that's okay. All right, now grid conversions from the third section. Let's make some more room. We're running out of space. All right, same thing. We're going to use the same equation, so let's go ahead and jot that thing down because we want to commit it to memory. Again, you're going to use it for forever. MAS1 over MAS2 is equal to the grid correction factor 1 and the grid correction factor 2. For your grid conversions, it's telling you, it gives you your MAS with a grid. This first one does anyways, your MAS with a grid, and then it gives you the grid correction factor, and you figure out what you would use if you did not have a grid. The following problems are a little bit different, but it's the same general idea. Okay, so if we used, let's set up our stuff again. MAS1, MAS2, grid correction factor 1, grid correction factor 2. So if we know that we had 15 MAS with a grid, so we got 15 MAS for our first thing. And it tells us that that grid correction factor was 3. And then it wants to know what MAS we use without a grid. Grid correction factor with no grid is 1. So we have our information we need. We can set this up. So we have 15 MAS over, we don't flippin' know MAS, is equal to the grid correction factor for that was 3, and the grid correction factor for no grid, which is what we're using in the second scenario, is 1. So we have 15 MAS is equal to 3x. The grid correction factor for the second thing, for the first thing, God bless America, the MAS for the second thing would be 5 MAS. We don't need to use near as much mass now because we're not using a grid. Those are the kind of calculations you guys are going to have for this unit. Again, grid correction factors and these kind of conversions that we just did, you're going to have for the end of time. That being said, let's go ahead and do the next one. Let's do 3B. I'm going to flip the paper around. If you get easily motion sick, turn your face away from this. I am that person who gets easily motion sick, so that's why I wanted to warn you. All right, let me straighten this up. Okay, easy pukers, you can look back again. All right, grid conversion in B. Let's go ahead and write out our equation again. And is that going to fit? Yes, okay. MAS1 over MAS2 is equal to grid correction factor 1 over grid correction factor 2. Okay. It says that we don't know the mass, but we did use a grid. So our MAS1 equals, I don't know. Our grid correction factor 1 was a 6. Is that correct? Yes, 6. And we used 5 MAS with no grid, which is a grid correction factor of 1. plug all that crap in. Do I have room for this? Hopefully. So with our first thing, we don't know the MAS. Over 5 MAS is equal to the grid correction factor of 6 over no grid was 1. So cross multiply again. X is equal to 30 mass. As always, I think it's a good idea to think about this in common sense terms. I know that the use of grids is not common sense per se to like everyone. However, if you think about it, if you used 5 MAS with no grid and you were using a grid that had a grid correction factor, well, if you're just going to a grid at all, you know that your answer should be greater than what you started with, right? All right, that is your starter. I want you guys to finish these, do the rest of them on your own. I have a key online, but you know what? I'm going to have you upload them. I'll put directions in the announcements. But I want you guys to do this worksheet, upload it for a homework grade. That way I can prove that you guys have attended class for this. And then I'll do another video. Hopefully I'll figure out a better situation for my camera. And I'll do another video with some actual word problems, because you know that your test questions will not look like these questions. So I'll work on that. You guys work on these, and we will get together again soon. All right, I just finished y'all's lesson, and it's all jumbled up. I wanted to show you that you can thank for being able to see math. That's right. Cans of chili supplies. And then I also wanted to show you, because we missed it the other day, got my office assistant, Carla. She works just as hard as her mommy does. And then Bob's Pot, who is actually behaving today. So that's a nice plus for today. I hope that these math problems help you. Like I said at the end of the working the math problems, I plan on putting together something where you guys can have some word problems. I just want you to start with the basics for right now. Upload your homework responses, do them, write them out, upload them. I'll give you a grade for them. You guys like those kind of grades? And then I'll have the key up also so you guys can reference that and check your maths. If you have any questions between now and tomorrow, just shoot me a message. I miss you guys. I hope you're doing good.